From the University of Central Florida's Center for Distributed Learning, I'm Tom Cavanaugh.
And I'm Kelvin Thompson.
And you're listening to Topcast, the Teaching Online podcast.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Kelvin. How's it going today?
It is wonderful. It's below zero outside since it's, November as we're recording this. And
are you talking some sort of strange Celsius?
Yeah, the Kelvin scale.
Yeah. It's really nice out, but it's not zero.
No, it's we have a Canadian guest, and I said, "Isn't this great weather for you?" He said, "It's a little warm for us." No, it's pleasant.
Yeah. Well, we've got kind of a special episode today, don't we?
A very special Topcast.
A very special Topcast. That's right. And as we always do when we have very special episodes, I assume we have some sort of very special beverage.
Oh, yes. It's very special.
To share while we listen and partake.
We do. You want to know what it is?
Surprise me.
Well, okay, so here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm just going to give you a hint.
Okay.
And it'll be like you have to guess. So here's your hint. You ready?
Ready.
Why so tense, Tom?
I assume it's decaf? I don't know.
Yeah. So what was that reference? You get the reference, right?
Isn't that an old commercial?
Yes, yeah. Right. You remember that from your childhood?
Yeah.
So Father Knows Best, Marcus Welby, Robert Young, always comes up to people asking about their tension level. And he says, you may be a little too jittery from drinking all that coffee that you're drinking. And then the person says, wow, and he said, well, you ought to drink Sanka.
Yeah.
So I want real coffee. I don't want Sanka. Sanka is real coffee. It's 100% real coffee, he says. So he's always, kind of the fatherly, patriarchal figure trying to calm everybody down. So I thought it would be appropriate because we're going to talk in a moment about a tension between roles with instructional designers and online education. So to resolve the tension, I brought us some instant decaf.
Wow. You can make a connection using anything, Kelvin.
Thanks.
Thank you for that creative coffee connection.
Yeah.
I do drink decaf, though.
Do you?
Fairly regularly, yeah. And a lot of people will say, what's the point of that?
Mm-hmm.
It's like drinking non-alcoholic beer.
Mm-hmm.
But I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And so let me take my first sip here.
Yep, see how good it is. How does it compare with all the rest of the coffee I bring you?
That is delish.
It's decaf.
No, it's fine. It's
yes.
fine. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You brought me coffee. What else can I say?
There it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're going to be talking about a tension, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And because I looked ahead in our show notes, I know that we will be talking to a particular person about a particular tension.
Indeed.
So recently we spoke with the one and only Dr. Katie Linder.
Mm-hmm. I know her.
Katie is currently the Director of Research for Oregon State University's eCampus. And formerly she was Director of the Center for Teaching and Scholarly Excellence at Suffolk University. It's easy for me to say.
Mm-hmm.
Katie is very active as a scholar, a speaker, and, as we all know, a podcaster.
Mm-hmm.
Big fan of Katie and her podcast. You and I have written some stuff that is forthcoming in one of her edited collections.
Yep, that's true.
And we had the opportunity to talk to her about instructional design, research, all kinds of stuff.
All kinds of stuff. So I guess we'll cut to that conversation. We would not want to let anyone think that she's actually sitting right here right now, but the quality might be so good that you think that if we didn't tell you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because she's in her studio and we are in ours. It's sort of like Terry Gross and
yeah, it's just like that.
Fresh air.
It's just like that. So we'll cut to the interview and we'll come back after the interview's over. Well, thanks for joining us, Katie. We're glad to have you here on Topcast. Big fans of the Research in Action podcast. So
Woohoo!
That's right. So we're glad to have you here.
Thanks, guys. I'm so happy to join you.
So we think that you might be uniquely qualified to help us work through something that we're always trying to balance here. So as online education professionals and working with others in our field, both at UCF and elsewhere, especially instructional designers, faculty developer kind of folks in the online space, we find that the practice, the doing the job, and the scholarship that comes out of our field, balancing that stuff is really challenging. On the one hand, you can be, hey, we're just practitioners, we da-da-da-da. On the other hand, like especially our instructional designers here at UCF are faculty, and they have for the promotion plan that emulates teaching faculty, where there's a professional performance and scholarship and service kind of a thing, just like teaching, research, and scholarship, teaching, research, and service. So I know your background in faculty development, your current role as a researcher in online education. I think you might be able to help us work this through. So can you just maybe at first just react to that? What do you think of that tension? Am I just crazy that this is a tension?
I think this is actually such an important point that you've raised, because this is actually a big part of why eCampus at Oregon State, which is where I currently work, why they started the research unit that I direct. The leadership here at OSU eCampus felt like they needed to be contributing more back to the literature, and they have a well-established online education program, significant amount of students going through it each term, a real range of disciplines, a really robust program, and they have a quality program. We've been ranked in the top 10 in the nation for the last 2 years, but there was not a lot of research going on for exactly the reasons that you're talking about. That balance is really difficult. And one of the things that I found is just you need a champion for that research. You need someone whose job is to think about what are the kinds of things that we need to be prioritizing. And that was one of the first things I did when I came into the research unit here, was really start talking with the leadership about there are so many things we could be researching. What do we need to narrow down to? And what are the areas that we feel are our strengths? And I think that for distance education research in particular, that's a huge challenge, because there are so many areas you could contribute to. Sometimes it's really hard to pick the one that you really want to make your niche in terms of your research contribution.
So how would you say that it's more important for you in your current role to generate original research and contribute it to the various discourse communities, or bring research from the literature in the field into your current practice at Oregon State so that it informs what you're doing? Or are you kind of feeling like you have to do both the input and output sides of those things?
That's a really great question. So I actually think, the latter of what you just mentioned of bringing the research in is something that we were already doing. We were really looking at teaching in a very scholarly way. We engage the Quality Matters assessment to make sure that our courses are designed very well. And our instructional designers are very well trained and are engaging in conferences and looking at the literature. So it wasn't really about bringing it in. It was definitely about creating more output in terms of research outcomes. But the other piece of my work is really supporting faculty as well. So I do conduct original research out of the unit, but I also help faculty to conduct research on online and teaching and learning, and particularly faculty that is not their area. So in the same way that we help faculty with just scholarship of teaching and learning, that's part of my role. And we have some fellowships that we fund through the research unit to support faculty to do that work. And I've run some workshops on research design to help train them. But I think that's also a large piece, is helping people to see where are the gaps, what are the questions that we're still trying to answer. And in some of those cases, I am providing more research literature to those faculty who may have questions about their discipline in particular and about the distance education research that's happened, in physics, for example. So there's a little bit of that. But I would definitely say the focus of the research unit is definitely more on conducting that original research and making sure that it fits within the priorities of what we're doing here at eCampus.
Now, just to follow up on that, you mentioned your instructional designers there at OSU eCampus. Now, are they already very practiced in conducting their own original research, or are you in a scaffolding role? Does it depend on the individual? Are you advancing the agenda? Are they advancing the agenda?
Or are you working almost exclusively with faculty?
Yeah.
Great question. So right now I work almost exclusively with faculty, and the instructional designers kind of depends on the project. So if I'm working on something, like for example, we're looking at putting together a project right now that's doing some research on our long-term faculty that have taught for us. And we have about 150 faculty who've taught for 10 years or more online for eCampus. And this is something we're just kind of interested in exploring. And there's a lot of things that we could explore. And so this is an area where I'm really going to be working with various people from eCampus and some people from our Teaching Across the Curriculum program and other areas, our Center for Teaching and Learning, and our instructional designers to help shape and guide the research questions that might help us to develop that project. So I often see our instructional designers and other members of our leadership team and other components of eCampus, our student support representatives and folks like that, as just collaborators. They're helping to inform me about the kinds of things that might go into the research design side of what we're trying to do. But I do work a lot with faculty as well, and just kind of supporting them and trying to get them the resources they need. And sometimes that's just, data. They need me to work or kind of liaise with our data analysts to get the information they need from an institutional perspective. So I can play that role as well. I would say, though, this is an area that I'm also interested in kind of looking into more, which is the professional development and kind of research literacy and research capacity of instructional designers. And I think that that's an area, just instructional designer research and instructional designers as a population that's being studied is something that's happening more and more now because we're starting to realize the importance of their role. And there was a recent report that came out, a nice study to kind of giving some foundational information about that I'd be happy to send and have you link in the show notes.
Absolutely.
But, I think that that's an area that I would like to explore more, what is the kind of research training that instructional designers are getting, because they are on the ground. They're working directly with faculty, and if they have that knowledge, all the better. They can do some great work.
I think interestingly, well, just as an aside, it sounds like the research group that you're responsible for at Oregon State is very analogous to our research initiative for teaching effectiveness here, run by Chuck Jubin and Patsy Moskal, and they do very similar work, and it's been, enormously fruitful for us in our relationship with faculty and kind of growing the scholarship of teaching and learning around distance education. But I think it's also interesting for us, and I'm not sure if this is the sole reason, but I think it certainly helps. Kelvin mentioned earlier that our instructional designers are considered faculty. They're non-instructional faculty, but they're faculty like research or clinical or librarians might be. And as such, they have a research and scholarship expectation. And I think they generate more than a typical kind of course builder instructional designer might, not to downplay the value or skills required to do that. It just gives them an emphasis where they're measured on it, so they're going to do it. And as a result, I think that we've had maybe a higher level of research generated by our instructional design team than maybe a typical instructional design team, just because of that incentive structure that's built in.
So it's an interesting strategy, right? So, I mean, have you seen that as you look at OSU, as you look at other institutions? And what's your experience of seeing instructional designers who are professional staff versus like framed as faculty, so to speak?
Great question. I mean, I would say, in my experience, I have seen them less framed as faculty. That is not something that I think is common. But actually, this is interesting. I kind of wish we were recording this 2 weeks from now, because next week I'm going to be chairing a panel of people who hire instructional designers, and we're going to be talking about their role. And one of the things we're going to be talking about is how has their training and kind of the needs that the skills and the knowledge and other things that they're bringing to that position, how has that changed over time? And I think that this is one of those areas that is changing. I think that we're seeing a real need for instructional designers to have those research kind of literacy skills. And one of the things, too, that's really been kind of emerging, and I think instructional designers are right at the center of it, is design-based research. Yeah. And that's something, actually, we've recorded an episode of that for the Research in Action podcast that'll be coming out in the future. But that's really about iterating and researching in a way that's very quick and that has really practical applications. And I think because of that, it makes it just perfect for instructional designers. So I hope to see in the future some of those kind of incentive programs for instructional designers who want to be doing more research. I think that there are certainly folks I've met that are interested, but they usually have quite a heavy load in terms of course design. If they're in a kind of a larger shop even, there's just a lot that they're kind of trying to produce, and it's a regular production kind of job just because of the way that our term structures work. So,
yeah, I could see that. I think that it's helped here that some of the function of those instructional designers has been, at least that part of their jobs, almost an extension of what the Research Initiative for Teaching Effectiveness does. Because some of the most successful instructional designers who have done this kind of research are those who have a terminal degree, understand research, have been trained in it through sort of graduate study, but then also partner with their faculty that they support to publish together about some of the things they're doing in online classes together, and sort of benefits both of them. It kind of lightens the load for faculty to kind of publish for tenure and promotion and other kinds of things. It helps the instructional designers. So those kinds of partnerships and collaborations, I think, are an extension of the kind of mission that you were describing that you have at Oregon State.
Yeah, I think that, the other thing that's really interesting is there was a recent report that came out of MIT, and happy to share that with you too, to link in the show notes. And one of the things that report called for was more kind of instructional design or technology expertise coming out of the faculty and people with terminal degrees helping to kind of design these courses. And I think in part so that they would have a research perspective. And that was interesting to see that coming out and to see kind of that role being highlighted, but also to be thinking about how that could come out of someone who maybe we would have thought about previously as just being a content expert. I think there's also, there's some question about, is the role of faculty changing in terms of what they need to know about technology integration into the classroom? And those will be really important questions in the future.
One of the things that occurs to me in our conversation here is that regardless of whether an instructional designer is classified as a faculty member with that kind of a promotion plan or is professional staff, it's clear from this conversation to me that all instructional designers still need to have a more intimate relationship with the research process, and probably increasingly are going to get drawn into that process in some role other than just a consumer, whether they're a collaborator, a participant in, or a co-researcher in some way. And so I think that the tension will continue to increase between the core job of an instructional designer and this scholarship thing. So I wonder, to me it's analogous, Katie, to teaching faculty who have to balance research and service and teaching. And I know that you've talked about this on your podcast before. I wonder if you have any generalizable tips from that world that we might share with our instructional design and other online ed professionals in our audience.
Well, I think that's such an interesting question. And actually, I think in some ways it's very different from that role. And because the first thing that came to my mind was this is an opportunity for collaboration, which I think, in the faculty sphere may not be an answer to that question when they're thinking about balancing. They may not be able to share responsibility of their research with other people or their teaching with other people, although in some cases they certainly could. And I think that, co-authorship and co-teaching can definitely be possibilities for that in certain disciplines. But I think when it comes to instructional designers in particular and researchers and faculty, taking a team approach is something that can be really effective, and really harnessing and using the skills that each person is bringing to the table. I think, for example, we were doing, and we continue to do, a research project here about closed captioning, and I can't do it without our instructional designers. I need them to help me to do some things kind of on the back end, to set up in our learning management system randomized groups of students that are receiving certain kinds of treatments. And they're directly involved in helping me to, test the fidelity of the implementation. They have to help me with that. It's not something that I have access to, and they get written into our IRBs for that. So that's a team approach that is going to make the research better in the long run, because they're bringing their expertise of what is kind of the capacity of our learning management system to do some of this randomized testing when it's really not built for that. So I have to really rely on their expertise. but then they may not necessarily be able to put together that research design without me. And similarly, we couldn't conduct the research without the participation of the faculty member whose course is, being used for the testing. So that approach, I think, is something that folks should consider and think about. It's really not a situation where you can have one person who's doing the research by themselves. That team approach is going to make it a little more, quite a bit more effective.
That's great.
Can I go back to something you said earlier, which was about your role working with faculty? And, it kind of puts me in mind of how our team here works with faculty to try to promote a research agenda, to understand how technology-based learning is being implemented across campus. And what we find is that certain disciplines value that kind of research a lot more than other disciplines who might only be interested in what NIH grant did you get, or, they're not so interested in SOTL kind of research, which this would probably be characterized as. And as you kind of work across campus, how much of recruiting do you do? How many people come to you? How do you kind of set the agenda for where you will spend your kind of most scarce resource, which I assume is your time, if it's anything like mine, and try to maybe expand the research portfolio into areas that might be new while still serving people who might be coming to you? There's probably 8 questions in there I just asked you.
Yeah. No, it's a great set of questions. I would say the first thing to know is I'm a one-person shop. So I'm the only researcher right now in the research unit, although I have a couple of part-time graduate students and a part-time admin who's supporting me, and I could not do the work without them. So there is a limit of just that resource, that I'm just one person. And so I can't be in all places. And we do have to prioritize certain areas. So I would say my main strategy has really been at first to try to get a lay of the land, to see who's doing what. And we had been offering some research support and funding in the past. And so that was something I could kind of start with to see who was engaging in that and what were some of the disciplines that were interested. But then also we kind of repackaged that funding opportunity as a fellows program, and we launched that in the fall of 2015. And that's been also a really interesting opportunity to see kind of what could come out of the woodwork. Who were the people who were kind of interested in doing this? And if they had a little bit of financial support, were willing to kind of take the steps to look a little deeper in what was going on in their classes and in their disciplines. And we had a wide range of responses. We have projects that are quantitative, we have projects that are more qualitative, and some that are mixed. We have them coming from a range of disciplines. Some of them are team-based, some of them are individual. And that was really exciting to kind of see who was interested. And then also we run a program here every spring called Faculty Forum, where we have about 200 to 250 faculty who have taught at eCampus or who are just interested in learning about what we're doing online come to those programs. And at the last one, I ran a 3-hour workshop on designing kind of basically a scholarship of teaching and learning project that integrated technology, and what would that look like. And we had a good response to that. I mean, I think part of it is just people don't quite know how to approach it, and they're not sure, if they've never done it before, what to do. And so even just having a person on campus where we can say, if you have those questions, Katie can consult with you, and she can kind of work with you on developing that project, is just, I think, a really important start, and just a foundation to give to people that there is a person who can talk with you and who can offer guidance. And even with IRB, we have some people who've just never gone through IRB. And they don't know how to do that. Yeah. So it's something else that, we can kind of provide some information on. But I mean, I think that part of it is just trying to let people know. In some ways, it's really trying to advertise the fact that the research unit exists now, now that we've been here almost a year, that people are starting to come and realize that they can work with us. And we work with a little over 600 faculty for eCampus. So there are quite a few that have just reached out and said, I've been thinking about this for some time and want to pursue it. So it's growing. It's exciting. I think it's one of those areas that we're going to see just different kinds of techniques and strategies used over time, especially as the research unit grows in terms of staffing.
That's great. You've been a wonderful addition to Topcast. People are loving that they're not just hearing Tom and I.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Plus, you had good stuff to say.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. That was really fascinating. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. We're talking from one end of the country to the other right now.
How about that?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah,
covering
thanks
the
to
globe.
you guys too. It's always so fun to chat with you and love hearing from you every month with your new Topcast episodes.
Thanks very much. Thanks for joining us. And everybody, you should always reach out and listen to Katie Linder on Research in Action podcast. So that was the amazing, and I suspect non-sleeping, right, Katie Linder.
Yeah.
She might be more productive as an individual than both of us combined.
Yeah, I respect the efficiency and the productivity that Katie's able to manage. So we should note that we actually had two conversations with Katie. While you've just heard one here on Topcast, the other is available on Katie's Research in Action podcast, where she kind of made us squirm a little while we had to talk about how we keep current with reading research, literature, and other kinds of keeping up with the latest developments in the space.
Or try to.
Yeah.
Or don't.
It's sort of like that episode of Different Strokes, where...
Was it a very special Different
Yeah.
Strokes?
It's where Different Strokes and the Facts of Life crossed over.
No, right.
Right? So
Yeah.
she's either the Facts of Life or different... Maybe she's Facts of Life, and we're Different Strokes, and so the episodes cross over, and you know, it makes each one better.
Uh-huh.
I hope. She made our podcast
See,
better
now
anyway.
I'm stuck on which one are we? Are we Different Strokes, or are we the Facts
What
of Life?
you talking about, Kelvin?
Yes. Okay. So you can be Gary Coleman.
That's right. That's fine. So you don't want to miss that. Go check out Katie's podcast if you want to start with our episode because you're such giant fans of the
right.
Topcast. Don't finish with ours though, because she's got all kinds of great people she talks to on a regular basis, including some of our colleagues here at UCF.
Yeah, absolutely.
She recently interviewed Patsy Moskal,
Yeah.
and that's a great one. So go check out Research in Action. It'll be in our show notes.
Yeah, and it is really good. She comes out with a new episode every week.
Yeah. Again.
Every week.
Again, not sleeping.
Not sleeping. Not
Yeah.
sleeping. Well, so to finish off this episode of Topcast, though, how might we summarize our conversation with Katie about instructional designers?
Well, I think it's interesting that there are so many different models.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are different ways of approaching this, and there's no one right way of doing it. You know, there are right ways for your context, and I think that came out in that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right.
All right, so whether they are classified as faculty or staff, instructional designers, or those with similar or related titles, I've seen instructional developers and instructional technologists and other kinds of titles. We all have a lot of hats to wear and roles to play in ensuring that the design and development of high quality and online courses is part of everything that we do. Some of these roles can come into conflict, and balance must be sought by individual instructional designers. As with so many things, though, when dealing with communication and collaboration, teamwork might bring more success than individual instructional designers going it alone. How true.
How true.
Yeah.
That's profound.
Yeah.
Must be the decaf.
It must be the decaf, or that you had something to do with the show notes.
One or the other.
Yeah.
Something.
Well, thank you for the decaf. I am, quintessentially non-stressed at the moment.
So glad you're not tense, Tom.
I am not tense. Thank you, Marcus Welby.
That's right. We're going to put stuff about that in the show notes, too.
We just alienated the entire audience.
That's right.
Has
Because some
no
of you,
idea who he is.
you're going to have this pop culture reference now. You'll be able to find out who Robert Young is and Senka and all that stuff.
I barely remember. So, yeah.
That's right.
Go look it up. There's this thing called Wikipedia.
I've heard,
Google.
I've heard of that.
So, thank you guys for joining us today. Until next time, for Topcast, I'm Tom.
And I'm Kelvin.
See ya.